Hello, and welcome to this video on representing consonants and vowels in orthographies. Often we talk of a good orthography as having one symbol per sound and one sound per symbol. But what do we actually mean by that?
By sounds, we're really talking about the sounds that make a difference in meaning. In the words met and net, the M and the N make a difference in the meaning of the words. In bet and bit, the vowels make a difference in the meaning of those words. These sounds that make a difference in meaning are called phonemes. Different languages have different numbers of phonemes. Some have few phonemes, like the Rotokas language of Papua New Guinea. Others have a lot of phonemes, like Nepali. Also, you may pronounce a phoneme in different ways depending on where it is in the word, its environment. These different pronunciations of one phoneme are called allophones. In this video, we will not discuss how to discover the phonemes of a language and their allophones. You should take a phonology course for that. Also, this video will only discuss alphabets, where a symbol represents a consonant or vowel. In some languages, a symbol represents a syllable or even a whole word, but we will not talk about those here. Tone and other features like nasality are often represented in orthographies as well, and these will be covered in other videos.
I see that one symbol per sound really means one symbol per phoneme. Can you explain more about what you mean by the word symbol?
Yes, the term we want is grapheme. A grapheme can be a single symbol, like K, but a grapheme can also have more complexity. And let's talk about that now. A grapheme can be made up of more than one symbol. These are called multigraphs. That is, two or more symbols that still represent just one phoneme. For example, sh is one sound, one phoneme in many languages. But in English, it's spelled with the digraph sh. In German, the phoneme sh is spelled with the trigraph sch. Multigraphs have some pluses. If your choice is between a multigraph and a symbol most speakers don't know, like esh, sometimes speakers will not like that strange symbol and would prefer a multigraph because the parts look more familiar. A multigraph also makes it easier to use on standard keyboards. There are also minuses. Since multigraphs include more than one symbol for one phoneme, they do make words longer. Also, it might cause confusion. If sh, for example, is in the middle of a word, how do you say it? In English, we have mishap versus bishop.
I see that some graphemes are single symbols, and other graphemes can be multiple symbols, multigraphs. Is there another kind of grapheme?
Right. The other kind of grapheme is a symbol with a diacritic added. This could be an accent mark or tilde or some other mark on top of or beneath a vowel or consonant. Using diacritics avoids one problem of multigraphs since it does not lengthen words. It also avoids the problem of a multigraph getting confused with two adjacent single graphemes. However, it does add some symbols that may look strange to some people and may not be popular. Also, It may make it harder to type on a standard keyboard or phone if the dominant language does not use diacritics. Finally, it can add complexity to both reading and writing. Readers have to actually notice the diacritics and not just the basic letters. And writers have to remember to write the diacritics.
Multigraphs and diacritics. These are interesting twists on how to write consonants and vowels. Is there another option for graphemes?
Yes, another way to keep the one grapheme per phoneme concept, but in a different way, is to use what we'll call spare letters. That is, letters in the script that are not assigned to a particular phoneme. For example, you could use Q to represent the phoneme sh. This idea avoids one problem of multigraphs. You don't have such long words. It also avoids the problems of diacritics, remembering to write that extra mark on the vowel. The main problem is that using a spare letter for a phoneme may cause problems when readers try to transfer to a major language, when that major language pronounces that symbol differently than the local language.
What about having graphemes with the same pronunciation as the national language?
Yes, we want to make it easy for speakers of a local language to also read other major languages of the area, and having a grapheme represent the same sound in both languages will certainly help in that. It is important to note that different languages around the world can represent the same phoneme in quite different ways. We've seen esh represented as sh in English and sch in German. It is ch in French, x in Portuguese, and either sc or sci in Italian. We also want to note that all these representations, single symbols, multigraphs, diacritics, and spare letters, all of these are ways of achieving the goal of one grapheme per phoneme and one phoneme per grapheme.
So far, all of these options have this result, that we can look at a grapheme and tell clearly what phoneme it is. The phoneme is represented in one and only one way. But what happens when this principle is not followed?
Let's talk about two totally different ways of missing the goal of one grapheme per phoneme and one phoneme per grapheme. These are what we call underrepresentation and overrepresentation. First, let's talk about underrepresentation. Underrepresentation is when there are fewer graphemes than phonemes. One example is when a language has 9 vowel phonemes but only uses 5 graphemes to represent these. If so, it is much harder for readers to figure out what the text is saying, because they don't know if the symbol represents one sound or a different sound. If you see G-E-B, is it Gabe or Geb? So you have to pause and think, what is this word? Readers can't quickly recognize the word. They have to stop and think of the possibilities. Reading is slower and harder. So, underrepresentation is usually a bad idea. It's true that there are fewer graphemes to learn, and some people might see this as an advantage. And underrepresentation is not usually a problem for writing, but it is for reading. Underrepresentation might actually be acceptable if there is a phoneme that is fairly rare. We would say that phoneme has a low functional load. So in that case, leaving out a symbol would not make much difference. Finally, if the community refuses to use all the graphemes needed, this may also force you to consider underrepresentation.
Is there the opposite problem too?
Yes, let's talk about that opposite problem, overrepresentation. This is where you have more graphemes than phonemes. A phoneme is represented by 2 or more graphemes. For example, if a phoneme has 2 different pronunciations, 2 allophones, and both allophones are in the orthography, then you would have 2 graphemes for one phoneme. There are some minuses, obviously. This means more symbols that people have to learn. It is also harder for writers to spell words, since they are usually not very aware of the allophones of a phoneme. More details about this in the video on phonological levels. Overrepresentation might be an option if the 2 sounds in the local language are not separate phonemes in that language, but they are separate phonemes in the national language, or other influential language, or in one dialect of the language.
I have one more question. Sometimes a suffix can change from one phoneme to another in different words, but it is still the same suffix. Do we keep a consistent spelling or change it?
Here's a case in English, dogs and cats, where the plural suffix in dogs has a Z sound, but the plural in cats is pronounced S. And both S and Z are phonemes in English. This gets into more detail in phonology than we will discuss in this video. We will cover more complex cases like these in our video on phonological levels.
What we talked about in this video is the idea of representing a phoneme by a single grapheme. One grapheme per phoneme and one phoneme per grapheme is a good goal. We can meet this goal in several ways. A grapheme that is a single symbol, multigraphs, diacritics, and using spare letters. These are all possible ways to represent a phoneme by a single grapheme. Remember, underrepresentation and overrepresentation should be avoided if possible. We do want to keep the goal of representing a phoneme in a single way.